The bright studio lights cast a dazzling glow across the polished stage of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Cameras swiveled, capturing every angle of the sleek set designed to feel casual yet commanding. A live audience buzzed with eager anticipation, clapping politely as the show's band launched into the opening theme. Tonight's guest, Zoe Saldana, a celebrated actress known not only for her blockbuster roles but for her outspoken activism, was moments away from stepping into the hot seat. What no one expected, however, was how quickly this routine interview would spiral into a defining cultural moment. Zoe entered the stage with poised confidence, yet beneath her calm exterior simmered a barely contained tension. The audience cheered, but an unspoken current of unease rippled through the room. As Stephen Colbert greeted her with his trademark charm, the energy seemed electric, but fragile. At first, the conversation flowed smoothly. Colbert opened with light questions about Zoe's upcoming projects, her passion for environmental causes, and Hollywood's shifting landscape. Yet, almost imperceptibly, the tone shifted. Colbert's questions grew sharper, probing deeper into issues of race, political accountability, and the responsibility of celebrities in a fractured America. His words, though measured, carried the weight of media skepticism, a subtle but pointed challenge to Zoe's public persona. Zoe's face tightened. Her eyes flickered with frustration as the interview veered from respectful discourse to what she perceived as condescension wrapped in performative concern. When Colbert questioned whether her activism was more image than impact, the room fell into a charged silence. The audience caught their breath, sensing a storm gathering just beneath the surface. Then, in a moment that stunned everyone, Zoe stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor. Her voice, firm yet edged with exhaustion, cut through the tension. "I'm done with this," she said. The cameras caught her silhouette as she strode off the stage, leaving Stephen and the audience speechless. Walkout was not just a dramatic exit. It was a lightning rod for larger debates swirling through Hollywood and the nation. Here was a woman who had built her career on both art and activism, refusing to be boxed into a narrative that questioned her integrity and commitment. The shockwaves from that single moment rippled far beyond the studio's walls, igniting fierce discussions on social media, dividing fans and critics alike. In that charged silence, something unspoken hung heavy: the exhaustion of activists who have long been asked to bear the burden of progress, the weariness of being questioned more than heard. Zoe's walkout was a refusal, a bold statement that the times of superficial conversations were over. As the lights dimmed and the show moved on, viewers everywhere found themselves asking the same question: what had pushed Zoe Saldana to this breaking point? And what did her departure reveal about the turbulent intersection of race, representation, and responsibility in today's America? The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose the raw nerve of a nation grappling with its identity, a confrontation neither Zoe nor Stephen could walk away from. From the moment Zoe Saldana first stepped into the spotlight, she was never content to be just another face on the silver screen. Beyond her memorable roles in blockbuster franchises, Zoe cultivated a reputation as a fierce advocate for marginalized communities, an artist who believed that storytelling and activism were inseparable. Her voice had become a beacon for many, especially in conversations around racial equity, indigenous rights, and the persistent invisibility of diverse voices in Hollywood. Over the years, Zoe's public persona evolved into something deeply intertwined with her activism. She was outspoken in interviews, candid on social media, and relentless in her calls for accountability within an industry that often prioritized profit over progress. Her partnerships with grassroots organizations, involvement in indigenous cultural preservation, and impassioned speeches at rallies and panels painted a portrait of a woman who refused to stay silent. Yet, This very outspokenness also made her a target. In the court of public opinion, she faced accusations ranging from being overly political to engaging in performative allyship. Critics on both sides questioned her motives. Some doubted the sincerity of celebrity activism altogether, while others accused Zoe of not doing enough behind the scenes. Navigating this minefield required more than resilience. It demanded a constant balancing act between authenticity and public perception. Zoe accepted Stephen Colbert's invitation to his show. It was with the hope of pushing past the surface-level conversations that often dominated late-night television. She intended to challenge the industry's complacency, to hold a mirror up to Hollywood's shortcomings while sharing the real stories behind her activism. But beneath the optimism lurked a wary anticipation, born from previous encounters where nuanced discussions were reduced to sound bites or dismissive questions. Her preparation was meticulous, rehearsing key points, readying herself to counter inevitable skepticism. She knew the media's appetite for controversy, for framing activists as either heroes or villains, left little room for complexity. Zoe's mission was clear: to speak truth to power without being silenced or diminished. This chapter of Zoe's journey is essential to understanding why the interview's tone struck such a nerve. It reveals a woman shaped by both triumphs and trials, determined to be heard on her own terms. Her walkout was not a spontaneous act of anger, but the culmination of years navigating an industry and society that often misunderstood or marginalized. Voices like hers dot as the interview unfolded. The collision between Zoe's deeply held convictions and the constraints of mainstream media would ignite a storm far greater than anyone anticipated, a storm that would force both Zoe and the audience to confront uncomfortable realities about activism, representation, and the price of speaking out. The interview began under the bright lights and watchful eyes of a primetime audience, with Stephen Colbert greeting Zoe Saldana warmly. The initial questions were inviting, touching on her latest film roles, her family, and the evolving landscape of Hollywood. Yet, beneath Colbert's genial demeanor lay a carefully calibrated tone that hinted at the deeper currents he was about to stir as the conversation shifted toward Zoe's activism. Colbert's questions grew sharper, carrying a subtle edge that belied their polite phrasing. He asked whether Hollywood's commitment to social justice was more about optics than genuine change, and whether celebrities like Zoe risked alienating fans by taking strong political stances. His words walked a fine line between curiosity and skepticism, a dance familiar to anyone who has faced the media spotlight. Zoe responded with measured grace, acknowledging the challenges, but insisting that activism must go beyond performative gestures. Her voice held the weight of experience, years of grassroots work, personal sacrifice, and navigating an industry reluctant to embrace real change. Yet, as Colbert pressed further, the tension between their perspectives became palpable. Exchange touched on issues of race, representation, and the complex expectations placed on public figures. Colbert framed some questions around the idea of cancel culture, questioning whether the activist environment sometimes stifled open dialogue. Zoe countered by emphasizing the need for accountability and respect, pointing out how marginalized voices were often dismissed or misunderstood. Throughout the interview, the undercurrent of ideological friction intensified. Each question and response layered on emotional and intellectual tension, exposing the deep fissures in America's ongoing cultural debates. The audience could sense the fragile balance teetering as Zoe's polite restraint began to give way to guarded firmness. This chapter set the stage for what was to come, a high-stakes confrontation where questions of identity, power, and responsibility would collide on live television. The polite dance of interview protocol dissolved, revealing the raw edges of two worldviews locked in conflict, foreshadowing the eruption that would soon shock the nation. As the interview pressed forward, Zoe's calm demeanor began to crack, revealing the frustration that had been simmering beneath her measured responses. When Colbert posed a question questioning the authenticity of Hollywood's activism, suggesting that it sometimes veered into mere image management rather than substantive change, Zoe's eyes sharpened with unmistakable intensity. She leaned forward, voice steady but charged with conviction. "This isn't just a PR game. I've been on the ground, working with indigenous communities, fighting for racial justice in ways that don't make headlines. To reduce all of that to optics dismisses the real pain and labor behind it." Her words cut through the studio's carefully controlled atmosphere, striking a nerve both on stage and among viewers watching at home. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the rising tension, the line between interview and confrontation blurring. Colbert's attempt to regain control was subtle but urgent, asking if perhaps the media's role was to question rather than simply affirm that Zoe didn't back down. Questioning is necessary, yes. But when those questions come from a place of skepticism that dismisses lived experience, it becomes another form of erasure. It's exhausting to constantly defend your truth to people who are unwilling to listen. Her frustration was palpable, not just with Colbert, but with an entire system that often turned activism into a spectacle, commodifying pain while resisting real change. The cameras captured every flicker of emotion, a tightening jaw, a sharp intake of breath, a piercing gaze that dared to demand respect. Colbert, visibly unsettled, tried to pivot, but Zoe's resolve had taken hold. The interview had transformed from a platform for dialogue into a battleground where Zoe refused to be diminished or manipulated. Her words echoed beyond the studio, resonating with activists and audiences grappling with similar struggles in the age of performative politics. This chapter marked the turning point, where polite conversation fractured, revealing the raw, unvarnished emotions that had long simmered beneath Zoe's public facade. It set the stage for the inevitable clash, signaling that this would be no ordinary interview, but a reckoning. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted from curiosity to confrontation. Zoe's words hung in the air like a challenge, a gauntlet, thrown down. Stephen Colbert, seasoned and composed, wasn't one to back away, and the ideological clash now unfolded with an unrelenting intensity that gripped everyone watching. "You paint a vivid picture of exhaustion and erasure." Colbert sighed, his voice steady but probing. "But don't you think the constant call-outs in cancel culture risk dividing us more than uniting? Isn't there a danger in demanding perfection from public figures and stifling open dialogue?" Zoe's gaze locked onto his, unwavering. Division is the symptom, not the cause. For too long, marginalized voices have been silenced, ignored, or gaslit. When accountability is demanded, it's not to punish, but to progress. Open dialogue means nothing if it ignores the pain and realities of those it supposedly serves. Her tone was firm, filled with the weight of lived experience, the years of being forced to educate others, to justify her truth in a society built on systemic inequities. Free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. When the media profits from sensationalism while ignoring the substance of our struggles, it's complicity, not dialogue. Colbert's expression flickered, a mix of challenge and something like grudging respect. The exchange wasn't just about differing opinions. It was a confrontation between two worldviews shaped by vastly different realities. His role as a mainstream media figure came into sharp relief against Zoe's lived activism and personal history. As voices rose, the audience sat captivated, caught in the crossfire of a nation's cultural reckoning. Every word carried weight, every pause thick with meaning. The dialogue revealed the fault lines beneath America's ongoing debates about race, responsibility, and the power dynamics of storytelling. This chapter was the crucible, the moment where polite disagreement gave way to raw, unfiltered confrontation. Zoe and Colbert were no longer just interviewer and guest. They were avatars of a larger societal struggle, locked in a battle that transcended the studio walls. The tension was electric, and no one could predict what would come next. The moment arrived like a sudden storm, breaking through a tense calm. Zoe's breathing grew steady but resolute, her posture rigid with a mixture of fatigue and fierce determination. The studio lights seemed harsher now, casting stark shadows across her face as if spotlighting the emotional weight she carried. Stephen leaned forward, ready to press further, but Zoe cut him off. Her voice, though calm, carried the unmistakable edge of finality. "I'm done with this." The words hung in the air, raw and unyielding. Without another glance, she rose from her chair, the scrape of the legs against the polished floor echoing through the stunned silence. The audience gasped, some whispering in disbelief. Cameras swiveled frantically to capture the moment as Zoe made her way to the edge of the stage. The energy in the room shifted, shock, confusion, and a ripple of empathy all mingled together. Stephen's eyes widened, his usual composure faltering for the first time. "Zoe, wait," he began, but she was already walking off, her back a silent statement of defiance and exhaustion. The band stopped mid-riff, and the crew scrambled to adjust as producers shouted behind the scenes, caught off guard by the unexpected exit. In her final words before leaving, Zoe's voice resonated with a blend of frustration and plea. "I'm tired of being a spectacle for ratings, of having my truth questioned by those unwilling to understand. This isn't just an interview. It's a media circus that too often silences the very voices it claims to elevate." The walk-off was more than a dramatic exit. It was an act of resistance, a refusal to be reduced to a talking point, to have her activism trivialized. It was a demand for respect, not just from Colbert, but from a society that repeatedly asks marginalized voices to perform pain on its terms. As the cameras continued rolling on an empty stage, the shockwaves rippled far beyond the studio. Social media erupted within minutes, fans and critics alike grappling with what they had just witnessed. For Zoe, this was not an end, but a breaking point, a public declaration that the struggle for genuine representation and understanding was far from over. The tension of this moment was electric, a vivid reminder that sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing one can do. Almost instantly, the digital world ignited. Social media platforms exploded with reactions, tweets, posts, videos, all dissecting Zoe Saldana's sudden walk-off. The hashtag #ZoeWalksOff and Respect Zoe trended within minutes, fracturing public opinion into passionate camps. Supporters hailed her as a courageous voice, refusing to be silenced by mainstream media's cynical framing. They praised her unapologetic stand against a system that too often commodifies activism into mere spectacle. Celebrities and activists quickly weighed in, their endorsements amplifying the moment. Some shared personal stories of similar frustrations, with media portrayals expressing solidarity with Zoe's refusal to endure another superficial narrative. Others lauded her for holding the powerful accountable and refusing to let her activism be diluted for entertainment's sake. But the backlash was equally fierce. Critics accused Zoe of being petulant or unwilling to engage in necessary conversations. Some argued that walking off a live show was disrespectful to viewers and colleagues alike, framing her actions as a publicity stunt rather than a principled stand. Media commentators debated whether this was a moment of righteous protest or an overreaction born from the hyper-politicized environment. Amidst this firestorm, Zoe herself took to social media to clarify her stance. In a heartfelt post, she spoke of exhaustion from constantly defending her truth, from a culture that demands activists be perfect, yet scrutinizes every misstep. Her words resonated with many, adding depth and nuance to the conversation. often lost in 280-character debates. This chapter reveals the fractured landscape of modern discourse, a space where moments of genuine outrage become battlegrounds for cultural and political wars. The walk-off transcended the confines of a late-night interview, becoming a symbol of the broader tensions between activism, media representation, and public perception. As the world watched, the incident morphed into a cultural flashpoint, one that challenged audiences to reconsider how society listens to, challenges, and ultimately respects those who dare to speak uncomfortable truths. The storm was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Behind the glossy veneer of Hollywood glamour and primetime television lies a complex web of power, contracts, and calculated messaging, and Zoe Saldana's walk-off sent shockwaves rippling through this intricate system. Industry insiders watched closely, knowing this wasn't just a celebrity outburst, but a potential catalyst for serious change. Agents and publicists scrambled to manage the fallout. For Zoe, who had carefully crafted her public image as both an artist and activist, the stakes were high. Could this act of defiance jeopardize future bookings, endorsements, or collaborations? Some within Hollywood worried it might label her difficult, a dangerous reputation in an industry where conformity often trumps courage. Legal experts weighed in on the contractual implications. Guests on late-night shows typically agree to certain standards of conduct. Walking off live television could breach these terms, potentially exposing Zoe to penalties or strained relationships with networks. Yet, her walkout also sparked conversations about the limits of such contracts when activists feel misrepresented or manipulated. Within studios and production companies, discussions intensified about how to balance hard-hitting journalism with entertainment value. Was it possible to host politically charged interviews without veering into antagonism? The incident forced a reckoning over editorial choices, raising questions about whether shows like Colbert's were truly platforms for meaningful dialogue or merely vehicles for spectacle. More broadly, Zoe's walk-off highlighted Hollywood's ongoing power struggles around race, representation, and authenticity. It underscored the precarious position of actors who use their platform for activism in an industry still grappling with systemic inequities and resistance to change. This chapter peels back the curtain on the often unseen mechanisms shaping celebrity activism, a battlefield where artistic freedom, media control, and corporate interests collide. Zoe's stand was as much a challenge to these entrenched systems as it was a personal declaration, signaling a shift in how power and voice are negotiated in contemporary Hollywood. Behind the glitz and glare of the studio lights, a quieter, more fraught drama unfolded. Production staff, writers, camera operators, the unseen army that makes live television possible, found themselves caught in the eye of the storm sparked by Zoe's walk-off. Producers recounted the careful planning that went into Zoe's appearance. They had anticipated a thoughtful conversation, balancing respectful inquiry with probing questions designed to engage viewers. But as the interview progressed, it became clear the tone was shifting beyond their control. One producer admitted to the mounting anxiety backstage as Zoe's frustration grew palpable. The editorial decisions to include pointed questions about Hollywood's sincerity and activism were made to spark meaningful dialogue, but the risk of alienating their guest loomed large. When Zoe stood abruptly, the crew scrambled, caught off guard by a moment no rehearsal could prepare them for. Writers shared their perspective on the show's role, to challenge cultural icons while keeping the audience entertained. They wrestled with the tension between journalistic integrity and the demands of ratings-driven media, acknowledging that moments like this, while explosive, could deepen public engagement. Camera operators described the chaotic flurry as Zoe exited. Quick pans, urgent commands, and the frantic effort to capture the unfolding drama while maintaining broadcast flow. The band abruptly stopped, and stage managers rushed to calm the audience. Yet, beneath the surface chaos was a human story, staff grappling with their own emotions, torn between professional duty and empathy for Zoe's exhaustion. The experience exposed the immense pressures on all involved in politically charged live television, where every word and gesture is magnified. This behind-the-scenes glimpse adds layers to the narrative, revealing that the confrontation wasn't simply between Zoe and Colbert, but part of a larger ecosystem struggling to navigate the volatile intersection of media, activism, and public spectacle. In the days following her dramatic exit, Zoe Saldana took a rare moment of candor with a close circle of journalists willing to listen beyond the headlines. Her voice, usually firm and unyielding in public, softened with reflection as she unpacked the emotional toll that had built over years of activism intersecting with media scrutiny. "I wasn't just walking off a show," she explained quietly. "It was a declaration that I wouldn't continue participating in conversations that asked me to perform my pain on their terms, that reduce my activism to soundbites or dismiss it as grandstanding." She spoke openly about the exhaustion of constantly educating an audience that sometimes seems unwilling to truly hear. It's tiring to be asked to prove your sincerity over and over, especially when you're carrying the weight of histories that have been ignored or erased. Yet, despite the backlash, Zoe reaffirmed her commitment to activism and the arts. "This moment has clarified for me the importance of owning your narrative, even when it's uncomfortable. We need to hold the media accountable to honest dialogue, not just entertainment disguised as conversation." She reflected on the delicate dance between celebrity and social responsibility, acknowledging the impossibility of being a perfect role model. "I'm human. I have flaws and moments of doubt, but that doesn't diminish the urgency of the causes I stand for." This chapter reveals a woman grappling with the complexity of public life, balancing vulnerability and strength, frustration and hope. Zoe's introspection adds emotional depth and nuance to the story, reminding viewers that behind the headlines is a person committed to change, willing to face personal and professional risks to speak her truth. Her reflections resonate as a powerful reminder that activism is neither easy nor neat, but a continuous, often painful journey toward justice. It sets a tone of empathy and understanding, preparing the audience for the broader cultural implications to come. The reverberations of Zoe Saldana's walk-off extended far beyond the walls of a late-night studio, igniting a broader cultural conversation that transcended celebrity gossip and political talk shows. Across news outlets, podcasts, and community forums, her defiant exit became a symbol of the ongoing struggle for authentic representation and media accountability in a deeply divided society. Experts on race, media, and activism weighed in, framing the incident as a microcosm of America's unresolved tensions. Sociologists highlighted how Zoe's refusal to be placated by superficial narratives echoed the frustration felt by many marginalized communities, a refusal to be silenced or tokenized in conversations that shape public perception. Media analysts critiqued the patterns of framing that often reduce complex activism to caricature, pointing to the incident as a wake-up call for responsible journalism. Activists leveraged the moment to amplify demands for more inclusive platforms. An honest discourse, using Zoe's walk-off to spotlight systemic issues within the entertainment industry and beyond. Community leaders organized discussions and panels, exploring the exhaustion of activists who are continually asked to justify their worthiness to audiences that may never fully listen. Meanwhile, cultural commentators debated the impact of celebrity activism in a digital age marked by polarization and performative outrage. Some argued that moments like Zoe's walk-off forced uncomfortable truths into the mainstream, breaking through apathy. Others cautioned against the risk of reducing activism to spectacle, urging for sustained engagement beyond viral moments. This chapter situates Zoe's walk-off within a larger societal context, revealing it as a catalyst for renewed dialogue about race, media representation, and the politics of voice. It challenges viewers to reflect on their own role in these conversations and the ways media shapes collective understanding by connecting the personal and the political. The narrative deepens, transforming an isolated event into a pivotal moment of cultural reckoning, rich with complexity and urgency. In the wake of Zoe Saldana's unprecedented walk-off, the media landscape began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. Television producers and network executives found themselves confronting uncomfortable questions about their own role in shaping narratives around race, activism, and celebrity. The incident forced a reckoning, an admission that talk shows and news programs could no longer afford to treat political activism as mere entertainment or a ratings gimmick. Colbert's show, in particular, faced public scrutiny and internal reflection. Statements were issued acknowledging the need for more respectful, informed dialogue, a commitment to elevating marginalized voices without weaponizing interviews for shock value. Behind the scenes, editorial policies were re-examined, with producers seeking to balance journalistic rigor and empathy more thoughtfully. Zoe's decision to walk off stage came to be seen not as an act of defiance alone, but as a catalyst for change. Activists and media critics pointed to her stand as a turning point, a moment that compelled mainstream platforms to reckon with their biases and editorial choices. New conversations emerged around ethical interviewing, media responsibility, and the power dynamics inherent in celebrity activism. Moreover, Zoe's reputation evolved, not diminished. She became emblematic of uncompromising integrity, a figure who refused to sacrifice authenticity for comfort or popularity. Her walk-off inspired a generation of artists and activists to demand respect on their own terms, emboldening voices long marginalized. The episode closed with a sense of poetic justice. A media ecosystem challenged to do better, and a woman whose bold exit illuminated the path forward. Zoe's walk-off was no longer just a fleeting moment of controversy. It was a lasting legacy of courage and change. As the lights dimmed on that fateful night, a new era dawned, one where media, activism, and truth converged with renewed purpose, promising a future where voices like Zoe's would no longer be forced to choose between visibility and dignity. The ripples from Zoe Saldana's walk-off continued to resonate months later, revealing unexpected alliances and new challenges. In the cultural landscape she helped ignite, what began as a moment of rupture evolved into a movement, with activists, artists, and media professionals coming together to redefine the terms of engagement. In panel discussions and industry roundtables, Zoe's name was invoked as a symbol of courage and uncompromising truth-telling. Documentaries and think pieces examined the media's evolving relationship with celebrity activism, questioning whether the system was capable of genuine reform or destined to perpetuate the same cycles of misunderstanding and spectacle. 4. Zoe herself, the aftermath was a complex mix of opportunity and challenge. Doors opened for projects centered on social justice themes, but with increased scrutiny came heightened expectations. She navigated a new terrain where her every move was magnified, a double-edged sword of influence and pressure. Yet through it all, Zoe remained steadfast. In interviews and speeches, she emphasized the ongoing nature of the struggle. This isn't a moment, it's a movement. And movements require patience, persistence, and the willingness to keep showing up, even when it's hard. This final chapter offers a reflection on legacy and the unfinished work ahead. It situates Zoe's walk-off not as an isolated incident, but as a beacon signaling the enduring fight for respect, representation, and justice within media and society at large.